Yaakov, Berachot, the section that's David's Harp. So it says, I rise up at midnight to praise you for your just rules, Psalms 119:62. The Gemara asks, what? David did not wake up until midnight? He was up from the evening, for it says, I rose up before Neshef and cried for help, Psalms 119:147. And how do we know that Neshef means the beginning of the night? Because it says, in the Neshef, in the evening of the day, in the darkness of night, and in the darkness. Proverbs 7, verse 9. This proves that David was up from the beginning of the night. Then why did he say, I arise at midnight? Rabbi Oshia answered, this is what David meant to say. It never happened that midnight should pass, and I should still be sleeping. I was always up well before that time. Rabbi Zerah said, until midnight he dozed like a horse. That has a slight sleep. And from that point on, he energized himself like a lion. Rabbi Ashi said, until midnight he was engrossed in the study of Torah, and from that point on he recited songs and praises. The Gemara asks, why does Neshef mean evening? Neshef means morning, for it says, David attacked the men from Neshef until the evening of the next day. 1 Samuel 30, verse 17. Doesn't this imply from morning until evening, and Neshef means morning? The Gemara counters, no, it means from evening until evening. So the Gemara asks, if so, the same expression should be used, and it should say from Neshef to Neshef, or from Erev to Erev. Rava said, you are right. The Neshef in that verse does not mean morning, but there are two kinds of Neshef. The evening Neshef when the night is removed and the day comes, and the morning Neshef when the day is removed and the night comes. The Gemara raises a question. David said, I arise at midnight. How did David know exactly when midnight was? Even if Moshe, our teacher, did not know exactly when midnight is, for it says, Moshe said to Pharaoh in God's name, around midnight, I will go out in the midst of Egypt. Exodus 11, verse 4. What does around midnight mean? Should we say that the Holy One, blessed be He, told him to tell Pharaoh that around midnight the firstborn would die? That's impossible. There's no uncertainty or approximation with God. Therefore, we must say that God told him exactly at midnight. But when Moses came to Pharaoh, he told him around midnight, because he could not be sure exactly when midnight was. Now, if Moses was in doubt, how could David have known it? The Gemara answers, David had a sign whereby he could tell when it was midnight. For so said Rabbi Abba ben Bizna and the name of Rabbi Shimon the Pious. There was a harp hanging above David's bed, and precisely when midnight arrived, a north wind came and would blow on the harp, and it would play by itself. He immediately got up and studied Torah until the break of dawn. At dawn, the sages of Israel came in to see him and said to him, Our master, the king, Israel, your people, need sustenance. David replied, Let them go and make a living from one another. Retorted the sages, A handful cannot satisfy a lion, neither can a pit be filled with the dirt you dug out. Some of it gets lost. In other words, the community needs outside resources to supply its needs. Replied David, Send out the troops and attack the enemy for plunder. They immediately went to ask Achitophel's tactical advice, and consulted the Sanhedrin and asked for their prayers. And they inquired of the Urim and Thummim whether or not they should be victorious. Rabbi Yosef says, what verse can we quote to substantiate this? It says, after Achitophel were Jehoiada, son of Benaniah, and Abathar, and the commander of the king's army was Yoav. 1 Chronicles 27:34. In other words, Achitophel was the advisor. As it says, in those days, the advice that Achitophel gave was accepted as if a man had asked advice of the word of God. Benaniah, the son of Jehoiada, this means the Sanhedrin, and Abathar was the high priest of David and represented the Urim and Thummim. And so it says, and Benaniah, the son of Jehoiada, was commander of the Kareti and the Peleti. Why are the Sanhedrin called Kareti and Peleti? Kareti, because their words are very decisive, Koretim, and Peleti, because they are very distinct, Muflaim, in their words. And finally, the commander of the king's army was Yoav. Notice the order of the verse. First Achitophel, then the Sanhedrin, then the Urim and Thummim, and finally the king's general Yoav, who was the one to lead the army into war. Rabbi Yitzchak ben Ada says, which verse can be cited to support the story of David's harp? It says, awake, O my glory, awake, O harp and lyre, I awake the dawn, Psalms 57, verse 9. The Gemara now returns to the discussion of the original question as to how it is possible that David knew the exact moment of midnight and Moses did not. Rabbi Zerah said, Moses certainly knew the exact time of midnight, and David did too. The Gemara asked, since David knew it, why did he need the harp to wake him up from his sleep? Since Moses knew, why did he say about midnight? The Gemara answers, Moses thought that Pharaoh's astrologers might make a mistake in calculating the precise moment of midnight, and when the plague would not occur at that predicted hour, they would say that Moses was a liar. For a rabbi has said, train your tongue to say, I don't know, because eventually you are going to make a mistake, and you'll get caught. Rabbi Ashi says, the time when Moshe spoke was midnight because the 13th and the 14th day of Nisan. Moses spoke was midnight between the 13th and the 14th day of Nisan. And he said to Israel, the Holy One, blessed be he, said, tomorrow at the hour like the midnight of tonight, I will go out into the midst of Egypt.